I'll go ahead and call the City Council regular meeting this Monday, March 17th, 2014, St. Patrick's Day to order, and ask all those who would like to join the council in the Pledge of Allegiance, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our next order of business is a topic under special business. It's Agenda Bill 6800, I-90 Transit Integration Planning for Eastlink. I will briefly introduce this topic. With us tonight from Sound Transit and King County Metro are two members here to discuss the joint planning efforts in the I-90 corridor, specifically as it relates to the opening of Eastlink in 2023. Joining us this evening is Don Billen, the Deputy Executive Project Director for Sound Transit's Eastlink project, and Victor Obeso, the Manager of Service Development for King County Metro. I think most of you are aware that Eastlink Light Rail will open for passenger service in 2023. That's a long way off, and even though light rail won't directly serve Issaquah, there are many opportunities to provide greater east side and regional access for our residents through this investment. In the future, Issaquah residents will be able to take a bus from the Issaquah Transit Center to a Bellevue or Mercer Island light rail station and access the system to the airport, downtown Seattle, downtown Bellevue, Microsoft, and the University of Washington, and points beyond. This evening, we'll hear about the planning and coordination that Sound Transit and King County Metro are working on together, and I would ask that Don and Victor please approach the lectern and enlighten us.
Good evening, Mayor Butler and members of the council. I'm Don Billen from Sound Transit, and we appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening. So the Eastlink Light Rail project is one of the light rail extensions that was funded in the 2008 Sound Transit 2 vote, which coupled with the light rail that's already in operation will result in a 50-mile regional light rail system that creates many opportunities for bus and rail integration in a way to improve regional access for riders and increase operating efficiencies for the transit agencies. Eastlink itself is a 14-mile extension across Lake Washington and the I-90 Center roadway, serving Mercer Island, Bellevue, and Redmond. There are 10 stations, and as Mayor Butler mentioned, the two closest to the Issaquah I-90 corridor are Mercer Island and South Bellevue. Looking specifically at the I-90 corridor, on the very west end of the corridor in Seattle, there is a facility that we refer to as the D2 Transitway that connects the I-90 Center roadway where it ends at Rainier Avenue with downtown Seattle. And that's used today by buses and carpools in and out of downtown Seattle. We are studying designing that transitway in the future to either be rail-only operations or to have a parallel bus line. In the case of rail-only operations on the D2 roadway, we would put a heavy emphasis on transit transfer facilities at the Mercer Island station and to a lesser extent at the South Bellevue station. And then as we look east in the corridor out to Issaquah, Sammamish, North Bend, and other cities not directly served by the Eastlink project, we're looking at how can they best access regional destinations in the future. So one of the things that we took a look at is once light rail is in operation, if you're making a trip we used Eastgate as a representative location in the I-90 corridor. If you're making a trip into downtown Seattle, is it faster to be on a bus all the way into Seattle or to transfer at the Mercer Island station? So the left two bars here show staying on a bus into downtown Seattle, either using that potential bus lane on the D2 or being in general purpose lanes west of Rainier. And then on the right is if you transfer. And you can see that while there's not a significant travel savings in transferring, the trip is no longer than if you stayed on a bus all the way into downtown. And it creates the opportunity for significant operating efficiencies if we aren't running both buses and trains across Lake Washington. So we're really looking closer now at how could we optimize that transfer scenario. So I'll turn the presentation over to Victor Obesa now to speak about those opportunities.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. So as we look at these regional connections, this is a graphic representation of the future Eastlink and bus network, focusing on the I-90 corridor to the east with some impacts on how services would interact to and from I-405 from the south. On this graphic, the light blue lines and circles representing the light rail alignment and station locations, major station locations, and the gray lines and circles representing the bus service destinations. So as we examine how we might integrate our two systems on this corridor, I want to remind the council, and I'm sure many of you are quite well aware of the integration that we've already taken on in prior efforts to implement Sound Transit Regional Express bus services on the I-90 corridor. Metro made a number of adjustments to its services as those Sound Transit services were implemented to have an all-day service on the corridor that complements one another. It's something we've done throughout King County on those Sound Transit Express corridors with the initial segment of Link. As we look at this corridor, we certainly have questions that we need to ask in terms of how can we best provide convenient and reliable options for our riders. How can we connect communities to the Link and Metro bus network? And how do we most effectively use our individual and combined resources, certainly with the objective of not duplicating resources, duplicating services for customers, but knitting them together in a way that works. So the concept, as Don described, is to provide to and from the east for all these communities east of the Link alignment, bring all riders on I-90 to Mercer Island to transfer to and from Link Light Rail, and to and from South I-405, those routes that Metro currently has today, which actually get on I-90, continue to downtown Seattle. We would direct them towards South Bellevue for transfers to Link at South Bellevue and on to downtown Bellevue or beyond. So obviously a critical element of this concept is to determine whether or not we can construct and operate bus services in the vicinity of the Mercer Island station that work for operations, work for the city of Mercer Island and its residents and travelers, and obviously work for bus and rail travelers. So this graphic is depicting the Mercer Island station with the station in the center lanes of I-90, the north-south roadways 80th and 77th with Mercer Way to the top of this graphic, and the Mercer Island Park and Ride just to the north of the station facility. So the work that we're doing with Sound Transit with respect to station functionality is looking at, today we move buses to and from the west, buses coming off of I-90, heading east, past the Mercer Island Park and Ride, continue eastward on their way. Now what we'll be looking is all bus traffic traveling to and from the east, needing not just to circulate and drop passengers off, but actually turn around within this area, either around the park and or rather the streets and the station itself. We're also looking at some innovative approaches to roundabouts that might have buses using just the northern passageway and then turning around via a roundabout. So we're working closely with the city to look at how we can fit bus operations on here. One of the important aspects of an operation of this sort would be to have space on street where buses can park as they complete their trips so that they're departing their next trip at the time trains are arriving and not just before. You wouldn't want several buses leaving empty of passengers. You want them to leave when those passengers are getting off the train and filling up those buses. The study itself will look at how transit can perform. Obviously, the travel times along the corridor, as Don was discussing earlier, including a comparison with the baseline of buses continuing down the I-90 corridor using the D2 roadway, a combination of the D2 roadway and surface streets and ramps at Rainier into and out of downtown Seattle. So we're looking at how this would work. As I say, the City of Mercer Island, a very important partner here, as are the two transit agencies. And as we are currently in a technical study to examine how we would establish operations, whether the concept is feasible, we're also preparing to work with Sound Transit to do outreach for current bus riders. Now, these changes wouldn't occur till 2023, but obviously we're examining the construction of facilities that will essentially put a template in place for how we would design service in the future. So we want to get out and speak to current bus riders about the prospects in the future of taking their trips to and from downtown Seattle, part via bus and part via Link Light Rail. It's something that we're looking at, obviously, in other parts of the Link Light Rail system, to the north in the University District at Northgate and in North King County. To the south, with the initial Link implementation, we've already reorganized over 30 bus routes in 2009 when that initial segment was organized, including removing some routes that traveled I-5 from Federal Way to downtown and SeaTac to downtown, working with Sound Transit to backfill that Federal Way bus service with buses and Link Light Rail to and from the airport. I'll speak to the next steps.
So in terms of next steps, we are expecting our study results in April, and then that will lead to the broader public outreach that goes beyond these council briefings that we're doing now in the second quarter of this year. And then we'll be looking for design direction from the Sound Transit Board this summer so that we can proceed with our designs for light rail in the I-90 corridor and move towards construction. And that concludes our presentation, Mr. Butler.
So questions or comments from any council member? Council Member Marst.
So people who now take express buses at that point would need to transfer. And so I was just looking up like the 554. I can get on the 554 in Issaquah at 7:42 in the morning, and I can be at 4th and Pike at 8:18, right? So that's a little bit less than about a little bit 36 minutes or thereabouts, right? But then I would have to do a transfer. And there's not going to be HOV lanes, right, in the future for surface vehicles across the west side of the I-90 bridge. Is that right?
There are HOV lanes that are being, will start construction next year that will go from Mercer Island to Rainier. How those lanes are operated ultimately, by the time Eastlink opens, is something that the state is looking at as a part of their tolling studies. So they've considered hot lanes, they've considered full tolling. That's a decision that ultimately is up to the state.
Okay, but there will be some sort of high occupancy vehicle lane for the I-90 bridge.
To Rainier Avenue. And then, from there, if buses are continuing into downtown Seattle, they're traveling on surface streets through downtown and dealing with that congestion that's expected to increase over time. So one of the advantages of transferring is getting, a grade-separated, free of traffic trip on light rail between Mercer Island and Seattle.
I see. All right, thank you.
Welcome.
Other questions or comments? Councilmember Winterside?
Just thank you for coming by and giving us the update. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have one question. So with a bus intercept at Mercer Island, when we redivert existing buses, that should free up some hours at King County Metro and Sound Transit. Will those hours be diverted to provide feeder routes to existing transit centers or facilities? Or have we gotten that far yet?
Well, that's the sort of planning that we do in the couple of years before actually making changes to the service. In our technical study to size the facilities and look at traffic impacts, we've looked at a level of bus service that's equal to today's frequencies from all of those markets that I showed on the graphic to and from Mercer Island. We've looked at and increments above that, including significantly above that. If you were to match today's frequencies in service to Mercer Island, then you're saving tens of thousands of annual service hours that either could be put into more frequent connections to and from the trains. At that highest level of frequency that we've examined, it would actually cost additional investment above and beyond today's resources. So we'd expect to begin somewhere between that current level and having to spend new resources on it. The resources typically are used within the corridors from which they come. We've had changes in our planning principles over the last couple of years, King County Metro. And so it remains to be seen 9 years from now exactly what the policies will be for the allocation of those resources.
Thank you, Victor. I guess it's great that we're talking about this now, given the fact that 2023 is a long way in the future. But I guess the point that Don made is that since we are currently approaching 60% design on Eastlink, there are some decisions that need to be made in the next 3 or 4 months so that we can design and construct the facilities that are needed to implement the integration of bus and light rail. So with that, I want to thank you for coming to Issaquah and giving us a bird's eye view of what the future might hold for us. And with that, we'll move now to audience comments. So, citizens' comments are an important part of the public process. We take them seriously and factor them into the decisions that we make. Anyone from the public who wishes to comment will have an opportunity to do so. Under general guidelines, when recognized, please come to the lectern and speak into the microphone. State your name, address, relationship to the city, and please limit your comments to 5 minutes. Audience comments are not a question and answer dialogue between the person making the comment and the council, and please address your comments to the entire council, not to specific individuals. So with that introduction to audience comments, has anyone signed up to speak this evening?
Yes, we have one person who signed up, and it's Vicky Orico.
Good evening, Mayor Butler. That's so funny to say. Council members, I'm Vicky Orico. My address is 13702 Southeast 51st Place in Bellevue. I'm a member of the Economic Vitality Commission, and I'm here to speak about the sector analysis that's in the budget. When the council created the Economic Vitality Commission, your stated goal was to provide the mayor and the city council with the expertise necessary to enhance and facilitate economic development within the city. It's imperative that the city have a strategic approach to deciding which industry or business clusters to attract and how best to go about attracting, retaining, and growing a diverse and stable economic base that supports city revenues, needed goods and services, and jobs. A sector analysis will help us determine the industry clusters that may be viable for our community and develop a strategic plan to grow our economic base and attract new businesses. My interest in serving in the EVC in the beginning was to help the city develop an approach to build a vibrant, sustainable economic base, to help figure out which businesses and industries will best fit with the city as it grows to its next level. And as a trustee at Bellevue College, I am also interested in helping ensure that we have the skilled, trained workforce necessary to support the city's next chapter. I strongly encourage you to include the sector analysis in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe, Amy Lee, you probably didn't sign up, but I know you're here to speak this evening. So if you would please approach the microphone at the lectern and introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Amy Lee. I live on 1045 First Place Southeast, Issaquah, Washington. I'm a resident of Issaquah. I'm a junior at Issaquah High School right now. So today I'm here as a representative from the program Sustainability Ambassadors, and our mission is to empower youth to catalyze community sustainability by participating in community and school district activities to promote the concept of sustainability. And today I'm especially here today to talk to you about and invite you to the planning day for the first annual Issaquah Community Sustainability Summit, which will take place this fall at Issaquah High School. And the idea for the summit is to measurably improve sustainable community conditions while at the same time strengthen local connections across generations and community sectors. So the goal of the summit is to bring together different groups in the community, and including students, various group, nonprofit organization leaders, and government members, and to have them communicate together in a conference-like environment. And in this way, the accomplishments of each of these groups could be documented, and we could have an accurate way to measure the progress of the community sustainable condition. And through this interaction between these groups, projects that need attention could be brought out and focused on, and improvements could be designed for the Issaquah community in the future. So for the planning day, we're inviting local thought leaders and sustainability champion, and we're also inviting student and teacher leaders, school district administrators, school board members, let's see, city council members, and city council. Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, so these people, and we're looking for about 10 to 20 representatives from each of these organizations. So we have 4 goals for our planning day on April 2nd. The first one is to establish the most effective mix of shared measurement system for community sustainability. Right now, we have about like 7 systems that are available to us, like the King County Green School Criteria, the City of Issaquah Sustainability Indicators, the STAR Community Rating System, and the Snapshot Survey from In-Class from inside of the 3 high schools. So the goal is to review all these systems and find and create the best system that fits the Issaquah community. The second goal is to identify community stakeholders that we could invite to the fall summit in the fall. And these, right now, we're reaching out to student bodies, so representatives from the ASB, DECA, Green Team, and the Youth Advisory Board from the city government. We're also reaching out to staff from the City Office of Sustainability, as well as we also invite representation of the City Council members. Our third goal is to devise a 12-month timeline for implementing the summit in the fall. So it takes 6 months leading up to the summit to plan for it, and then 6 months afterwards to review results and plan for the next summit. Our final goal for the planning day is to test ideas for a collective impact project that meets 3 criteria: that it's the easiest to accomplish in 12 months, it engages the greatest number of people.
1 minute remaining.
Okay, sorry. And engages the greatest number and diversity of people, and that it creates the greatest measurable impact. Example projects could be to reduce carbon emission by solarizing homes and changing the community fuel mix from petroleum-based to renewable sources. So right now we're receiving funding from the Boeing Charitable Trust, and we received this fund to test out this sustainability summit strategy in 3 King County communities, and Issaquah will be the one to pilot the first sustainability summit. And we're really excited to initiate its change, and if you cannot make the planning day, we'll provide more information on the full summit in the fall. Thank you for your time tonight.
Amy, thank you very, very much for sharing that with you and for the invitation. As soon as you have a date, I know that city council members here, a number of them would be interested, as I would in attending that summit. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Has anyone else signed up? Is there anyone else desiring to speak? Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm John Traeger. My address is 710 7th Avenue Northwest here in Issaquah. I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of my role as a co-chair of the Economic Vitality Commission. The EVC is recommending that the City Council approve funding for an industry sector analysis as part of the 2014 budget amendment on this evening's consent agenda. There's a consensus on the Commission that we need good metrics to support both our assessment of the current economic state and areas of opportunity in the future. So without a sector analysis, it will be difficult to deliver a meaningful, fact-based economic vitality strategic plan, which we're working on right now, which we're striving to deliver the draft of in time to merge with the upcoming comp plan updates. So having a sector analysis available would greatly improve the quality of what we deliver this year. So thank you for your consideration of this item and for inclusion in Agenda Bill 6794, amendments to the 2014 budget.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience desiring to speak this evening? Commissioner Harmon.
My name's Tom Harmon. I'm at 4369 243rd Avenue Southeast in Klahani. And I'm speaking not as a commissioner, but I'm speaking as a resident of Klahani. And in attending the last 2 meetings, I was in favor of just turning the PAA over to Sammamish, and a lot of the promises made in the campaigns and so forth, that if the vote doesn't go through. But one other thing that became evident is the possibility of splitting the PAA, and the southern parts of the southern area may remain in Issaquah or go through a further annexation. So what I have passed out is basically the small map. This was from my Boundary Review Board presentation, where I did suggest to the Boundary Review Board the possibility of annexing a smaller area first. And so this map came from the school district with the high school boundaries. But the bigger map that I worked on that you have has the all-in-one map, the precincts, the subdivisions, and in red, the high school boundaries. And I'm, at least if there's any thoughts or plans to split the area, that the map might be helpful in sorting all the area out and where you split, where you might want to split it out. The big lettering is the precinct names, and the smaller lettering is the subdivision names. With the also at the south part, there was some talk, I think, that maybe everything south of 48th would be Issaquah, but so 48th is the southern boundary of Brookshire HOA. There are smaller plats within these. I think Klahani has 23 or 24 of them, but just kind of showing some of the HOA boundaries. So what it is at least a maybe some help that as you deliberate or decide where do you go from here, that at least a map of the area is helpful. Also suggesting of maybe getting up to Klahani. I think I've noticed it in the last two votes that there really wasn't any town hall meetings or so forth. There was the one Nesbitt meeting in the last election, but at least getting up there and talking to folks, you know, before making decisions of what you want to do. We all know that the Brookshire area was voted, I think 76% yes, and it's all a matter of, do you split it at the school district, at the Brookshire HOA boundaries, or looking at the three precincts that got over 60, the Brookshire, Ranch, and Klahani. So I think there's something that maybe can help you deliberate and make a decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience desiring to speak this evening? Anyone else in the audience desiring to speak?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Matthew Botton. I'm here tonight representing the Greater Issaquah Chamber of Commerce as well as a member of the Economic Vitality Commission. I work at 155 Northwest Gilman Boulevard. I'm here tonight to encourage you to consider funding the industry sector analysis as part of the mid-year budget adjustment now before you. As mentioned previously, an industry sector analysis will help provide a professionally developed set of data to help inform the concurrent development of the economic development strategic plan, as Mr. Traeger mentioned earlier. This analysis will help uncover Issaquah's unique positioning in terms of the present scope and health of our established and emerging industry sectors and clusters, and provide recommendations as to how these clusters fit into the regional growth projections for each industry. This data-driven approach is considered a best practice in helping a community effectively target new business recruitment opportunities as well as new expansion opportunities for our existing corporate clients in our community. The analysis will also help inform the collaborative dialogue between Bellevue College, our businesses large and small, and city leaders to help ensure that we are guiding and supporting the offerings provided through the college's future Issaquah campus. The data and findings of this analysis will provide direction on the workforce needs of our business community, which Bellevue College is well positioned to provide, as we know. Keeping successful companies and high-paying jobs in Issaquah because of this workforce training initiative, informed by a sector analysis, is a compelling and important economic development opportunity for our community and one that we should take advantage of. Overall, the sector analysis deliverable will help us to focus our limited resources to the business retention and expansion opportunities that will have the highest net impact on job preservation and job growth, and therefore a strong return on investment for the community. We'd urge your consideration of this request, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience desiring to speak? Anyone else? Third and final call, seeing no one else desiring to speak. Audience comments are closed. We'll move now to committee and regional reports. Councilmember Milligan.
I have none, thank you.
Councilmember Pauley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a small report. King Conservation District has reconstituted their advisory committee, and they held their first meeting on March 5th. I'm an alternate appointed by Sound Cities Association, and this first meeting of the reconstituted committee really was about establishing a charter and voting for chairs and vice chair, and there was nothing at this point in time that was to be brought back to the cities for discussion. But I just wanted to let you know that they had started meeting.
Thank you. Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Land and Shore Committee met on Tuesday, March 11th at 6 p.m. here in Chambers. Looked at a number of issues. One of them is the Agenda Bill 6761, 2014 docket of proposed comprehensive plan amendments. That we had recommendations on that will be coming back before council, so I won't go through all of it. However, one particular area of interest may be the recommendation that we change wording regarding Klahani to update the comprehensive plan to potentially release part or all of the Klahani PAA, as well as prepare materials for a potential annexation of a smaller subset of the PAA. Once again, that bill in its entirety will come back before council, and I expect to give a more full report of it at that time. We received an update on marijuana legislation at the legislature and reviewed the 2014 Land and Shore Work Plan. This concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Scher.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening to members of the viewing public. The Council Infrastructure Committee will meet tomorrow night at 5:30 p.m. in the Pickering Room of City Hall Northwest. On the agenda is an update on our food packaging ordinance that was passed several years ago, restricting the use of polystyrene containers and requiring compostable and recyclable food packaging. We will also have a update on retail carryout packaging, aka the plastic bag ordinance, presented by the Resource Conservation Office. We will have Agenda Bill 6775, which is a proposed interlocal agreement with the City of Bellevue for utility pre-assumption within Issaquah corporate limits. We will also have, upon approval of tonight's consent agenda, Agenda Bill 6797, Cooperative Watershed Management Grant Application for Juniper Street Park, Issaquah Creek Restoration. And then we will have a host of transportation-related and multimodal project updates ranging from East Lake Sammamish Parkway to water main replacement to Rainier Boulevard and Northwest Dogwood Street. The meeting is expected to last about an hour and a half. It might run a little bit over depending on the quantity of items. Additionally, the Eastside Transportation Partnership met last Friday on March 14th, and at that meeting we had a presentation from King County's interim director of their transportation district, which is essentially pending the outcome of the April 22nd special election ballot on the Transportation Benefit District proposal in terms of what the district would involve, and some questions from the partnership about that particular plan. We also had a review of projects that were recommended to ETP from the Technical Advisory Committee, the TAC. There were 8 projects that were put into the hopper, and the partnership unanimously recommended passing on 5 of those projects, a couple within the city of Bellevue, near the Spring District Bell-Red Corridor, one in the city of Renton, one up north dealing with a bridge in Bothell, and there was a 5th one too, I think in Kirkland, perhaps. That was Kenmore was the last one. And those were forwarded on for another round of voting through the countywide process, where the other sub-area boards will also recommend their projects, and then they'll all be placed into the next round, so to speak, of competition. And then finally, we had just some discussion amongst the members in terms of our 2014 work plan, which is still subject to being developed, and I will be meeting with the chair and co-vice chair tomorrow to go over that. It was requested that if any member jurisdictions, so I'll convey this to everyone here on the council, had any input on potential issues for the partnership to consider in 2014, to please let me know, especially as I'll be meeting with them tomorrow, and we can look at potential items for the work plan. That includes anything from legislative updates to particular projects, tolling, I-90 corridor, issues of interest to our city. So feel free to let me know after the meeting, and I can discuss that with Chair Stillen and Vice Chair Ackerlander tomorrow. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two reports this evening. The first is Services and Safety Committee will be meeting April 3rd at 5 p.m. in the Eagle Room. At this moment, there are just two items before us. The first is 6787, the interlocal agreement with the state treasurer. The second is 6798, the Julius Bone Pool renovation performance contracting. And those two will be before Services and Safety on the 3rd. My next report is Eastside Fire and Rescue. I represent as one of the two directors. Mary Lou is our second director representing Issaquah. We had our regular meeting for the month on the 13th. It was a very short meeting as we were then recessing into a retreat goal-setting session. The first possible good news is that the Operations Committee was approved and will be moving forward, and that is going to be providing us a little bit. We also looked at their organizational framework at that meeting. I have a little bit more further on down my line. The other was that we had election of chair and vice chair. Michael Mitchell from District 10 was elected as vice chair, and I was elected as chair. And we then adjourned into our goal-setting session. And in the goal-setting session, we had a great discussion, sort of put it into three parts. The first was the administration's projects. I'll just give you a couple of the key highlights of what had been discussed. Provide a multi-year proposal for the board to address infrastructure, training, and needs for the agency. Advocate for a permanent community medical technician, which I think hopefully will be we've had a pilot program in our area, and what it is on the lesser aid calls, this community technician will respond. It's a one-person team, and they will be at the discretion of dispatch as to which calls that they will be taking, but it frees up two firefighters and a full aid car. So it had great results, and hopefully it will be picked up and completed some more. Implemented the training efficiencies, looking at and regional automatic aid with partnerships, completing some work to create an insurance efficiencies and establishing an insurance pool. As budget goals, there's an area in the operation budgets that we should focus on in order to reduce costs. So we're really taking a good hard look at where we're spending our money and how we're spending the dollars. Some of the board goals, we've spent a little bit more time in regards to the operation committee and prioritizing the ad hoc committee and the list of possible items that they can be taking up this year for us. The first one we asked them to look at and bring back to us is the finalization of the nonprofit status for Eastside Fire and Rescue. We also looked at budget efficiency, labor negotiations, and the potential addition of new partners for the organization. So that completes my reports.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
No report.
And Councilmember Winterstein.
I have no report. Just want to remind the council that our next committee of the whole is next Tuesday, March 25th, right here in council chambers. And the agenda has not been set, but we will be hearing from a number of presentations related to goal setting, including perhaps some emerging issues from the mayor's office and the presentation of the Economic Vitality Commission's SWOT analysis, among other things that at least have been requested. So that'll be a vital part of our helping everybody prepare the goals. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Please note that there were a few minor edits made to Agenda Bill 6791, submittal of 2014-2015 Coordinated Prevention Grant Off-Cycle Application. The most notable is the correction to the dates in the third paragraph It should state that the offset grant cycle is for 2014-2015, not 2012-2013, and there is a corrected copy that accompanied the mayor's report earlier. There will not be an executive session held this evening. We are considering ways to make our tennis courts at Tibbetts Valley Park more accessible year-round and to offer more programs to the tennis playing community. We would like to invite you to a presentation about proposed enhancements to Tibbetts Valley Park, including a proposal to cover the existing tennis courts. The next meeting is this Thursday, March 20th, from 6 to 8 p.m. at Tibbetts Creek Manor. Helping us grow something fresh at Issaquah's newest park. If you love to garden but lack the space at home, we think you will love joining us at our Issaquah Community Garden located at Confluence Area Parks. The 31 organic garden plots are managed and cared for by the Issaquah Parks and Recreation Department. New applications are accepted on an ongoing basis, and those selected for garden plots will be able to access the site starting April 1, 2014. To apply, visit Issaquah WA, that's Issaquah WA .gov/garden, that's issaquahwa.gov/garden. The Greater Issaquah Chamber of Commerce, in coordination with the City of Issaquah and local hoteliers, restaurants, and hometown attractions, is featuring world-renowned expert Roger Brooks and hometown in a community presentation on developing Issaquah's tourism program. The presentation will be held from 6 to 8 p.m. March 31st at the Pickering Barn. The public is invited, but registration is strongly encouraged to ensure a seat. This presentation is part of his work and will serve as a kickoff for his stakeholder outreach and research. The final tourism business plan will be delivered to the community this summer. And that concludes the mayor's report. Moving now to the consent calendar. There has been a request to move Agenda Bill 6794, amendments to 2014 budget to regular business, and that will appear under regular business as item 8C. With that, have the accounts payable and payroll been reviewed?
Yes.
And what is, did I hear 2 yeses?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. I thought I heard 2. What's your pleasure with the consent calendar? Council Member Winterstein.
Yeah, I move that we adopt the consent calendar as amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none then, all those in favor of approving the consent calendar as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries unanimously. Moving now to regular business. The first item under regular business is Agenda Bill 6786, interlocal agreement with Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District. This is coming back from a council work session, and we have our attorney that has worked with us on that. So I believe I will invite Jeff Cray to the podium and announce, as he's approaching the podium, that the Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District approved the interlocal agreement this evening before our meeting by a vote of 4-0. And so, Jeff, it's all yours.
Good evening, Mayor Butler, council members. It's great news that that was approved by the Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District. We had a good work session last week. We've made some adjustments to the agreement in response to the comments. I believe that you've been provided with the red line version. I don't know if you've been provided with the clean version, so I brought those this evening. And with your permission, I'll just walk through the changes that were a result of the work session last week. There was a discussion with regard to, why don't I wait until you all have
I was just going to suggest, Jeff, that you do that. Some are not paper dependent. Some are this evening, I noticed, by the number of computers out. And
I would be in the paper dependent camp, Mayor.
Okay.
So what you've now been provided is a clean version that includes the exhibits. In section 1.02, the prior draft had a reference to the City of Sammamish representatives. They were certainly instrumental in helping bring the city and the district together, but we didn't feel they were necessary to the agreement, so we struck that language. In section 2.03 at the end, there were some discussions about the length of the district's access to review the decommissioning of the Lower Reed Infiltration Gallery, and the determination was that we would ensure that any representatives of the district were accompanied by representatives of the city, but we would not put a duration on the period for which they would have access. That was a compromise position that is reflected in the agreement now. In section 2.04, the district was to pay cost to the city, and there was some discussion about at what point that would come due. The earlier draft had the word complete, and that's been changed to plan, design, and pursue completion to provide some more flexibility with the city's ability to collect from the district's contributions. There was also a language added in that section to say completed by the city or city has incurred costs eligible for district funding, which is a defined term in the agreement. And then at the end, defining when that period closed for the city to collect funds. The determination was that any costs that were incurred by the city within the 5-year period would be eligible for funding, but after that they would no longer be eligible for funding. And then in section 2.08, there was some concern expressed about the language with regard to what communications needed to be the subject of a joint press release and the narrowness of the reference to news services. And so that provision has been broadened slightly to include public communication regarding issues addressed in a manner that deviates from the agreed terms, so providing some greater flexibility there. And then finally, there was a typo in the prior draft that referred to the memorandum of agreement that underlies the interlocal agreement as having been dated in June of 2014. Obviously, that was not possible because that's in the future, and so it was changed to the actual date, which was January 13th, 2014. And those were the only changes from the prior drafts.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there questions of Jeff concerning the changes to the draft as identified at the council work session?
And Mayor, before questions, I may make one further note. The decommissioning, the exact method of decommissioning was something we discussed whether to put into this agreement. And the determination was that we didn't yet have agreement on that, and so we put language in there indicating that there would be future agreement on that. So that's why that's not, the materials that you've seen earlier with RH2 Engineering's proposal for a method of decommissioning, we understand those are getting a favorable response from the district, but they're not yet at a point where they're final enough to include within the interlocal agreement.
Great. Thank you. So, what is the council's pleasure? Councilmember Winterstein.
Well, I will move to approve and authorize the mayor to enter in and execute the interlocal agreement with Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Councilmember Winterstein.
Well, thank you. I feel like I need to make some comments because this is a pretty significant milestone, and it would set the clock running on 5 years, and that's a significant contribution from the water district to mitigate or what to do next in terms of discharging to surface compared to injecting underground. There were some comments recently that this has been an easy process. That's not my recollection at all. I think it's been a very difficult process. I think there was quite a bit of separation and a difference of opinions expressed throughout. But I think, and I like the way this bill says it right at the top, and I want to bring this attention to any of our citizens. For the benefit of our citizens and ratepayers, to a large extent, there's more than one way to handle the surface water correctly. And to a large degree that this is a business decision on behalf of the city to do it in a manner that still is is environmentally sound. And of course, any potential projects will go through full review and may have the state SEPA review as well. And so, I'm glad that we could get to this point in this time frame. And I commend Mayor Butler for really tackling this right from day one, entering in the office. I'm glad to be moving forward in a constructive way as partners with our district, our neighbors, which also service a number of our own residents and businesses. So I'm glad we're moving in this direction, and I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Other comments or discussion? Seeing none then, all those in favor of the motion to approve and authorize the mayor to enter into and execute the interlocal agreement with Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? That carries unanimously. Moving now to Agenda Bill 6801, issuance and purchase of unlimited tax general obligation bonds for the Parks and Recreation System. And our Finance Director, Diane Marcotte, for the staff presentation, and backed up by a little bit of help from our bond counsel.
Good evening, Your Honor. Before you tonight is an ordinance that would authorize the issuance of $10 million of unlimited tax general obligation bonds for the purposes of making parks and recreation improvements. This issuance of this debt was brought about by the voters of the city of Issaquah overwhelmingly approving Proposition 1 in November of last year. In looking forward into the issuance of the debt, there have been a lot of changes in the municipal securities law, and as a result of it, I met with the city administration and we formed what we called a financing team. And the financing team is composed of the city staff as well as Susan Musselman and Thomas Topher from Public Financial Management, as well as Alice Ostick from Foster Pepper. I had to think about short O or long O. So when the team was brought together, in addition to looking at the $10 million of debt, the team, because there's a lot of strength and a lot of the experience that we're bringing forward to the council tonight, is we also looked at some opportunities to refund some of our existing debt. So included in this ordinance is a recommendation that we look at 3 potential existing bonds that would generate some savings. 2 of the issues are voter-approved debt, and one of the issues is a councilmanic debt. So included in this ordinance is looking at the opportunity to refinance the debt that would result in net savings on the debt service. The process is, once the council approves this ordinance tonight, there'll be a lot of the behind the scenes working with the financing team, doing a bond ratings presentation to Standard & Poor's. Our newly elected mayor will be playing a critical role in that presentation. So we look forward to having his wisdom and guidance, as well as for him a new learning experience. So that will be a new opportunity. As I indicated, the process involves a lot of behind the scenes, and ultimately at the end, we would look at having some additional money in our coffers sometime in June. Speaking to the specifics of the bond ordinance, I'll turn it over to Alice, and she can provide you with some of the key salient points in the ordinance.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Alice Ostick. I'm with Foster Pepper. Glad to be out here again, seeing you. It's been a couple of years since we've done a bond issuance here, and I've always enjoyed coming out to talk with you. As Diane pretty much summarized what's in the ordinance for you, the ordinance you see in front of you is a delegation ordinance. It does delegate the authority to actually kind of sign on the dotted line to the finance director. There are a number of parameters that must be met before she can go ahead and authorize that sale, and those are all set forth in an exhibit at the back of the ordinance. So if you're interested in looking at the really salient details, they're in that part of the ordinance. As Diane mentioned, this bond ordinance authorizes both the new bonds that were voted on and approved by the voters last November, as well as those 3 refunding possibilities. Susan's been working quite hard to determine what the savings level would be. This ordinance requires a minimum of 5% savings in the net present value after all of the costs of the refunding have been taken care of. So it's an all-in savings to the citizens of Issaquah. If that savings threshold is not met, those bonds won't be refunded. This ordinance allows kind of a 2-year window within which the city could go ahead and do the refunding if the savings are present. So Susan will keep monitoring that for the city and work with Diane to identify the right time to do those any of those 3 refundings. And if any of them never produce the 5% savings, it'll just expire. And if it came up in the future, we could come back to the council and ask for a new authorization to do the refunding. So that's how the refundings would work. There are a number of details in the back. Like I said, the maximum term of the new bonds is 20 years. Any refunding bonds would not go any longer than the existing bonds. So it's not about stretching that debt or anything like that. It's just about pure savings. So, is there any questions? I'd be happy to take them.
Questions? Councilmember Martz.
Is this the sort of thing that normally gets reviewed in committee before we see it at the full council?
I spent some time looking back at the history of it. Typically what used to happen is there would have been a conversation, we would have issued the debt, and then the debt, we would have settled it and brought it back to council. Because this is a delegation, this is a little different compared to the historical past, so we're sort of doing some new ground.
Okay.
So it typically has not gone to committee because of the issuance of the debt.
Okay. Second question is that 5% inclusive of fees and costs? It's all in 5%?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Scherer.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions. I guess first I'd echo Councilmember Mart's comment about committee, because when I looked at this for the first time, I was rather confused, and I'm still not even sure with these 3 refunding candidates what these bonds actually are. I see 2001, I see 2005, 2004. Were these for the SPAR, for the police station, for what exactly were we paying back? So that's one, and then I have 2 other questions.
I'm going to go from memory here, but I know it's in our draft of the official statement, and maybe Susan or Tom has that. I believe that the 2001 bonds were the senior center. The 2005 bonds were the other parks, open space and parks bonds. And 2004, I do not recall off the top of my head. I remember the voted ones.
Okay.
Were those parks as well? We can get that answer for you. What
Okay.
the purpose
Yeah,
of those were.
again, because it didn't have a committee report or anyone to talk to in a committee, that was tricky. Question number 2, I notice in the, and I just lost it, there was a section here it is, it's under interest rate in Exhibit A. Exhibit A, Section D. Each bond shall bear interest at a fixed rate per annum, and then it talks about no rate of interest for any bond may exceed 6%, and the interest cost to the city may not exceed 6%. And then when I looked at the 01, the 04, and the 05, it jumped out at me that none of those interest rates, even on the tables, were at 6%. And so are we just not getting as good a deal nowadays? Are rates higher? Can you explain that?
I'll let Susan jump up and address rates for a moment, but I will just say that the parameters in the back are set looking at the 20-year new money bonds. And so they're also looking at giving us flexibility to be able to actually do the financing in today's market. So Susan can talk about that. But on the refunding portions, again, the key there won't be the nominal interest rate on it, which I will say because it's short, it will be much lower than 6%. And it will probably be much lower than what the coupon rates are on the current outstanding bonds. But again, that 6% cap is really looking at the long bonds on the new money, the 20 years.
Yes, and keeping in mind that the ordinance has a period of 2 years. But as Alice mentioned, the coupon rate, that's the stated interest rate on the bonds. And in this market, it's very common for investors to require a 4 or 5% coupon rate, but they will give you a premium to really buy those rates down to a lower actual average interest cost. So we have 2 different parameters. One that says that no interest rate shall exceed 6%. So that's the stated interest rate. And then the other one talks about true interest cost, which is a fancy way of saying really the average interest cost on the bond issue. And as Alice said, that's really with the long-term bond in mind and with the 2-year window in mind. On the refundings, those will be limited by the further parameter, which is under I, that requires that 5% net present value savings. For sure, at 6%, those refundings would not meet the 5% threshold. So they're really kind of 2 separate caps, so to speak, but the refunding parameter would force you to take a lower interest rate on the refunding portions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And then my third question, and maybe Diane can come back for this one. When the bond was being, I wouldn't say promoted, discussed on the city website, it was indicated that the estimated property taxes on a home assessed at $420,000 would not exceed $46.20 per year. So if this agenda bill is approved, can we assure the public who voted in the Parks bond that that estimation is still relatively accurate so that upon issuance of the $10 million plus the refunding candidates, however that works out, that folks in the city will be paying approximately $46 a year on a $420,000 home?
Yes, particularly as we are continuing to get new development in the community, that rate, that dollar amount is actually slightly decreasing because we're increasing our assessed valuation. And then additionally, that is part of the purpose of doing a refunding is that there is savings on the interest and the principal. So that's all the more reason to do it because it's savings internally on the limited general obligation obligation bonds as well as the unlimited. So that's part of the purpose of a refunding, is because it does generate savings compared to when we originally issued the debt.
Thank you.
Other questions or discussion? Councilmember Winterstein.
Clarifying question. I think you may have already addressed it, but we're looking at potentially 4 distinct events. The 3 refinance and the new issuance.
The bond ordinance that you have in front of you allows it to be done in multiple series or multiple different events. We would do it within the fewest number of bond issuance as could be done, because that will be economically advantageous. So if we can do them all at once, we will. I do understand that working with the city staff who's working on the parks projects, that there may be good reasons to issue some of the parks bonds earlier and some later. But that will all be kind of timed and phased to make sure that all of the money is available when it's needed and not any earlier, so you're not paying interest any earlier than you need to.
Thank you.
So going back to Councilmember Martz's first question about referral to committee to get into more detail, it seems like we've gotten into a fair amount of detail during the Q&A, after the presentation this evening. And Diane, your comment about sort of plowing new ground on this and your research trying to figure out past policy, apparently we have not really used this approach before. So it really depends on whether the council is comfortable going forward this evening. What would the impacts be if this was referred to committee and come back to the council, Diane?
It would push back the issuance of the debt to more into the summertime.
Okay.
And part of it was what when we had our earlier conversation was what we wanted to do is to get all of the pieces in place as far as the council approving the ordinance, but more importantly, working with Standard & Poor's and getting our bond rating, and then watching the municipal market. Anybody that follows municipal securities, sometimes one week is better than another week, and if there's a holiday, you don't want to issue before that because you just don't have that many interested buyers. So what we were trying to do was to set the stage to provide the maximum flexibility in order to get the best rates on the bonds and optimize our overall cost.
And you spelled out some of the complexities associated with issuing bonds and additional steps that we have to go through. So again, it depends on the comfort level, but with maximum flexibility comes the opportunity for timing the bond market in a way that we could end up with a more advantageous rate. Councilmember Martz.
Yes, but I do think in the past we've said go ahead and buy them when they make sense, right? We've had times in the past where it's not like we approve a bond and you have to go purchase it tomorrow morning, right? My concern, I guess, is around the fact that this, and this is where I display my ignorance of terminology, but the repurchase, what's the word, refunding piece seems new to me, right? And that's the bit that I would have liked to have seen go to committee. However, I find the 5% NPV hurdle to be sufficient. That I don't. That covers a lot of ground with me. But in general, I'd like to see these things go to committee. But I'm not on this particular one. I don't feel the need to send it to committee.
So, other questions or discussion? What is Councilmember Winterstein?
I think it's time to make a motion.
I would entertain a motion.
Okay. I move to adopt ordinance number
2710.
I'm sorry, that was 37?
2710.
2710, 2710. regarding the issuance and purchase of not to exceed $10 million unlimited tax general obligation bonds to pay the issuance costs of the bonds and provide for the issuance of general obligation refunding bond, and to approve the city's designated representative to approve the final terms of the sale of the bonds and provide for other related matters.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Additional discussion or questions? Councilmember Scherer.
Well, thank you again, Mayor. I just have one request then, and I concur with Councilmember Martz's comments, that perhaps the council can be apprised of what refunding option and, you know, where things go here over the next few months, because it's still not clear to me what all three, I guess now we know two of the three potential candidates, but it was also, I think, that piece that was throwing a bit more complexity into the issue. And there are budgetary implications for whatever option is pursued, because when we do our annual budget process, we look at obligation bonds as part of that, and there's a whole section in our book every year on those. So it would be helpful, I think, for us to know as this moves forward what exactly is being done and how.
We can certainly keep the council apprised of progress as we go forward and the details of that progress. And probably that would most likely go to services and safety as we move through the process.
I appreciate that, and I'll be supporting the bill this evening, although as you may recall, I did not support the original bond initiative given the project list, and now, you know, that was the fun part, picking the projects. Now we pay the piper. So you know, the voters spoke, and you know, we don't have a precinct map or anything in front of us here, but you know, in general, it was very well supported initiative, and so I think we've been clearly directed by our constituents to move forward with the issuance of these bonds, albeit just a mere few years after taxing ourselves on the last park bond. So I hope that perhaps this will be the last bond we see for a little while. But I'll support the bill this evening.
Other questions or discussion? Seeing none, then, all those in favor of adopting ordinance number 2710 regarding the issuance and purchase of not to exceed $10 million in unlimited tax general obligation bonds to pay the issuance costs of the bonds and provide for the issuance of general obligation refunding bond, and to approve the city's designated representative to approve the final terms of the sale of the bonds and provide for other related matters, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries, unanimously. Now we've had a request to move Agenda Bill 6794 to regular business, and that is amendments to the 2014 budget. And for the staff report, our Finance Director, Diane Marcotte.
Thank you, Your Honor. The budget amendment before the council is one that is primarily what I would call a housekeeping. Many of the items included in the schedule on pages 60 and 61 are projects that we had anticipated completing or at least making more progress in 2013. And when we began reviewing where those projects were at in January and February, they did not get as far along as we had originally anticipated. What's important to note is when the departments are providing that information to the Finance Department, they're providing that information in June and July on where they believe they're going to end up at the end of the year. So sometimes we're a little bit off the mark. There's different reasons for why we maybe not have made as much progress as we had anticipated. So the majority of the items included in the schedule are simply carrying forward projects from 2013 into 2014 that we've had either started or for other reasons there was a delay. Probably like one of the last ones is our Vector truck. We were able to acquire and bring on premises the actual chassis, and then all the other things that make up the Vector truck that makes it do what it does we couldn't get that part here until 2014, so we only have half of the vehicle ready to go. So that's just one example of the project. The other part of it is the largest appropriation is in fact for the bond issue. When we were working on developing the 2014 budget, it was during the period of time when we were going to the voters, and we had discussions with the council saying that in early 2014 we would come back to you with a budget amendment assuming passage of the proposition. So the majority of the issues here is related to the park improvements. What you'll note here is while we are issuing $10 million in debt, in working with the department, the Parks and Recreation Department, at this point in time, we are issuing $8 million of debt. Of the $8 million, we're anticipating that we'll spend $4 million in 2014, with the remainder of it we'll appropriate in 2015. If you recall, this is primarily related to the pool. When we're looking at doing the major improvement to the pool, we're looking at the last 3 months of the year and then the first 3 months of next year. So the actual spending of the dollars is going to be crossing 2 years. And then looking at some of their other projects, they're saying that many of them will not really get much activity in 2015. So rather than issuing debt, rather than paying interest on that, we said let's hold off on at least $2 million of the debt until 2015, so we're not making payments on the issuance of debt for which we're not spending the money. So that is the majority of it. The other one is that you heard the mayor announce tonight was when we did the budget, it wasn't included in there was $25,000 to do the pea patch or the community garden. And so that's included in here, the work associated with that. Now that's still part of Confluence Park Phase 1. The funding is available there through the remaining 2006 park bond money. So it isn't any new money that is associated with it. So anything to do with a park improvement bond is either related to the issuance of the new debt or existing 2006 bonds. And I'd be happy to speak to any of the other projects that are simply being carried forward.
Councilmember Martz.
What's this talk of a sector analysis?
The sector analysis is a request for new money, particularly in the general fund. And at this point in time, there isn't. We're really only closing out February, and we're not seeing any additional revenue to support doing the sector analysis. And our understanding during the council deliberations was if we were to fund this, the funding would have to come out of the 2013 ending fund balance. So there might be a possibility of doing this later on if we see additional revenue, but because this is a new appropriation, it wasn't included in this recommendation because it would decrease the ending fund balance.
I'm sorry, for clarity, so it is not in here or it is in here?
It is not in here.
It's not in here. So the speakers that we heard this evening were in favor of us amending this to include it.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. This budget, there were several of the departments put in a request for new funding and new projects. And because we're only into February, we haven't had enough historical information to know if there are going to be any excess money in the general fund that would be supportive of any of the new projects. And if there was additional money, then we would bring it forward to the council through a workshop or through safety and services to say, here are some requests, how do you want to approach that, and then have the administration's recommendation.
Councilmember Scher.
Thank you, Mayor. Typically, I recall we do like a mid-year budget adjustment, and so there will be another opportunity mid-year to take a look at the issue that was just being discussed.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a little different philosophy and approach. It's sort of like bringing to the council budget amendments when there is sufficient new information, changes, rather than simply doing it twice a year. Because what happens is so much time has passed, we all sort of lose track of, will we approve this in January and February? So I really have a more of a philosophical approach of providing the information to council in a more timely basis. So we could even have one in May and maybe another one in July if the circumstances warranted it.
No, thank you, and I for one appreciate that, and I think it's great to have that information coming back. You know, we do our budgeting on a one-year cycle. A lot of cities do it every two, and so just having our hands on it that much more often. The amount that was being discussed in audience comments for the analysis, that was about $30,000. Was that the amount, if I recall?
The request coming from the department was $50,000, so the comments on the $30,000, I'm not sure if there's been some different conversations about how the dollar amount got reduced.
Was the analysis formally recommended by EVC, or did we hear tonight from just, we heard from individual members of the commission in support of it. Was there a formal discussion before EVC recommending that the council take action as part of this process or any other process yet?
Well, you may remember this was part of council budget deliberations last year, and so council actually voted to remove it from the budget last year, and so there was a recommendation last year from EVC and the Economic Development Department and the mayor, I think, to include this, and it did not get included. It got actually, taken out of the budget. So what you're hearing is really a reconsideration of that previous decision that council made to remove it from the budget and now put it back into the budget.
My colleagues on the council last year did not support my enthusiastic recommendation to include funding for this in the final budget. So now I'm on the other end.
And honestly, I don't. I have to confess, I don't remember what the reason was. And I'm sure we had a very good reason at the time for doing what we did. We've obviously heard a lot of comments about positive benefits. It would seem, just in my opinion, given that we're going to have an opportunity, it sounds like, within just a few months, very short period of time, to reassess our 2014 budgetary situation, or perhaps this is the only item that bears reassessment, that between now and, say, May, it could be the topic of some further conversation, and that would allow us within, I'd say, just 60 to 90 days to either reconsider or make a decision on the issue. It's just my opinion.
Councilmember Winterstein?
Thank you. I agree with you, Josh, that the truth is we don't know if we're going to get another budget amendment bill this year, and I think there's some pretty good discussion here, and there's a couple things in the actual ordinance itself that I wanted to point out. But before I do that, I actually would like to have a conversation about really what to do next. So I'm actually going, in the agenda bill, one of the options of the actions on this is to refer it. So I'm actually going to make a motion to refer this agenda bill to the April 3rd, 2014 Council Services and Safety Committee meeting.
Second.
No.
I'm sorry.
Second.
Tola won.
Tola, I believe you won that.
He did.
I'm sorry.
I lost the toss.
And the reason, there's a lot of good discussion. I think this item, I personally have no memory, I probably shouldn't admit that, of the phrase sector analysis of the budget. I do remember specific things. As a matter of fact, I even pulled up my worksheet from the budget and things that we explicitly asked to have moved out. But I'm sure my memory could be not serving me correctly. So I think the opportunity, I would be interested in the opportunity to hear more about that. And at the same time, the way the ordinance is worded, and I wanted to point out, the third whereas specifically mentions several projects that began in 2013, and then goes on to list them, and then the fourth whereas in 2013, the voters of Issaquah. As you continue down, any references to when a project may have started are gone, and they may be new as far as this language is. Though it does say to complete. I'll look at one of the. It says whereas $279,000 appropriated in the equipment rental fund to complete the purchase of the Vector truck. And so I think the language above, it talked about, where these projects started or where the original appropriation. I mean, there's the context disappears in the later whereases.
The new whereas that you're speaking of in 2013, those are all new projects related to the bond issue. That's why the distinction. And then on the.
No. The third whereas. Several projects that began in 2013 related to special projects need to be appropriated.
Yes.
As a result of not being completed by December 31st, 2013.
Yes.
So I think I'm hearing that a number of these others are also a result of not being completed. But
yes,
it doesn't say that.
Well, if you go over to, yes, it's there in the other paragraphs, like in the capital improvement fund will complete the Highwood Reservoir, the equipment rental, and then the new appropriations for the community garden. But we can certainly take it back to services and safety.
So there is a motion and a second. Additional questions or discussion? All those in favor of adopting ordinance number? No, excuse me. It's refer, all those in favor of referring? I was on the wrong page. Thank you, Paul. Referring to the April 3rd, 2014 Council Services and Safety Committee signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that carries unanimously. So, Eileen, you started out with a small agenda, but it's grown just a little
grew
bit.
considerably. Yes.
Is there anything else for the good of the order? Oh, I have something for good of the order. We are joined this evening by King County Council member Kathy Lambert. Thank you for visiting Issaquah and observing our city council in action this evening. Come back anytime, Kathy. Anything else for good of the order? Councilmember Winterstein.
Yes, so 2 weeks ago, Girl Scout Sydney gave a gift to the council of 6 boxes of Girl Scout cookies, and I thought the council should be aware that they were shared with community members at the Issaquah Meals Program last Thursday, and numerous people expressed their gratitude for the cookies as donated by the council through the Girl Scouts. Thank you, Sydney.
Thank you, Sydney. Anything else for good of the order? Seeing none, then we are adjourned at 8:32.
Hey, Alice.
Good to see you.